This episode is brought to you by Podbean, the easiest, most affordable option to get started in podcasting. Stay tuned to hear how you can get your first month of Podbean for free. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Breaking Into Cinema, the show where we discuss movies, new and old, that you may not have seen or analyzed before. I'm Kevin.
I am an FBI agent!
Wow.
And I'm Tiffany.
Stop looking at me, Swan!
McLaughlin.
And I'm Cassie.
Hold on to your butts.
Ballschmidt.
Jurassic Park classic. Tiffany, what movie is your quote from?
Billy Madison.
Oh, I haven't seen that one. So today we're going to be talking about the film Whiplash, but I just want to give a quick content warning. Mentions of the emotional and physical abuse contained in the film will appear in our discussion. So if you are sensitive with that topic, just, keep that in mind. So yeah, like I said, we're discussing the 2014 film Whiplash. The drum movie, am I right? What a with J.K. Simmons.
The drum movie. Yes, it's all about drumming, folks.
With J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller. The story follows Andrew Neiman, who is an ambitious young jazz drummer in pursuit of rising to the top of an elite music conservatory. Terrence Fletcher, played by J.K. Simmons, is an instructor known for his terrifying teaching methods, discovers Andrew and transfers the aspiring drummer to the top jazz ensemble before changing the young man's life. But Andrew's passion to achieve perfection quickly spirals into obsession as his ruthless teacher pushes him to the brink of his ability and his sanity. So as you can see, that in itself contains hints of emotional abuse. And we are going to be, diving in there, spoiler filled, of course. But right now, we're going to give a quick spoiler free thoughts on the film. Personally, I think it's a great film. I remember it breaking into the scene back when it came out in 2014. This was kind of like the indie film that kind of like revived indie films for the 2010s. It introduced indie films to like a whole new generation, from my perspective, at least. And it still holds up very well. And I still, watching it again, I was like, yeah, this is great. And honestly, I feel like it was even better this time now that I'm older and had more experience under my belt and kind of like see the real world connections that the film had. What about you, Tiffany?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think this film is excellent. I think I get more stressed out every time I watch it, though, because it is such a stressful experience. And
same girl.
And I feel like the more you watch it, the more you're able to like know when something's coming, but kind of like, because you're reading, you've kind of like studied these characters a little more, and now you're like, ooh, I know when something's coming, and it's like based off their mannerisms and stuff, and it's just, but however, I come to like find more stuff that I hadn't noticed before. So it's just one of those really deeply layered films that's executed so well.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Cassie?
I totally agree with Tiffany. I remember the first time watching this film because I watched it originally back when it came out in 2014, and then obviously watched it again to refresh myself for this. And I remember the first time that I watched this, like, my heart hurt from, like, the stress that I was under. And, oh, my gosh. It's a little bit... I don't know if it was better or worse the second time around. I think it was kind of just as... just as stressful.
It was an experience.
It is. It's a different experience, but, like... It's so hard for like multiple, kind of layered reasons on, how difficult it is to watch. Yeah. But it is also like a good, just like Kevin said, it's a good story, and it's a great example of how indie films can be pitched and can have success in kind of an interesting format, which we'll talk a little more about indie films and how this one was made later, but it's a very cool story that I think is really neat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for this film, when we're discussing it, we want to introduce you guys to subtext. So what is it? Why is it important for us? And so, spoiler warning right now. Starting with the rest of this episode, we are now spoiler filled. So if you have not seen the movie and you want to, without spoilers, you are free to do so. You can. I give you permission to turn this episode off and turn on the movie instead, and then please come back afterwards. So Google defines subtext as an underlying and often distinct theme in a piece of writing or conversation. And I know subtext is kind of like a broad topic, so I wanted to ask you guys, what was your own personal definition of subtext? For me, subtext, it helps us understand the film's intentions and the moral of the story. So, you have like the, it can be as simple as, hey, stealing is wrong kind of deal, like from, kid shows. Like that is subtext. That's also revealed in the main text. But also it shows like the implications of why stealing is wrong and what it does to a person, like when someone feels guilty and stuff like that. But what about you, Cassie?
I think it's basically what you said. And then I think it's important to look at it in all the ways that subtext can be shared in a film. We can share subtext to the audience through dialogue, by what they are saying and also what they are not saying, kind of reading between the lines. It can be shared through cinematography, which is a great way because filmmaking is a visual medium to kind of portray that subtext by leaving somebody, isolated in the frame and everybody else kind of blurred out to, share isolation. Or to get up really close if you're wanting to feel some sort of tension or a growing tension. You can do it through audio, and you can also share some of those themes and morals through production design and art. And it's a combination of looking at those individual pieces as well as their whole, how those individual pieces speak on their own, as well as how they combined to create this subtext and story.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Tiffany?
Yeah. Well, you guys like pretty much hit it on the head. No, but like sometimes when I'm like watching a film, the subtext goes right over my head. It'll take me like a couple years to like understand what the film is trying to tell me. And because like sometimes I just don't get it sometimes. Yeah. So it's also just like exploring like interpretations of themes as well. Like some people think that the movie could be saying one thing subtextually and someone else can take it a different way based on literally all the things that Cassie was trying to describe. Like the way people interpret a film is different for everybody, but there is like a filmmaker's intention to some degree, but a lot of times, it is left up to us to decide, which is cool, but
yeah. Right. And I think that what you're saying is like a totally fair, and like what you're saying about not seeing things until later. I think that's a great example though of how films change as we grow and their meanings change as we grow and learn things and become, more educated on topics, or even just like personally, have some growth.
I've noticed that I've picked up like on subtext in films, like after I've gone through something that a character in a film is going through, or like I see it in a new lens and I'm like, oh, I see what this movie is trying to tell me now. And it's like, it's so interesting watching movies that I loved 10 years ago because I loved like what they were putting in front of me, and now I like understand it more. Like a good example I think of that, I'm just gonna throw it out there, is like Josie and the Pussycats. Did you guys ever see that one from like early 2000s?
I mean, I watched it a long time ago, but
I did not understand that movie was talking about consumerism when I was a kid. I just did not. I just wanted to see them play their instruments.
Yeah, I can't imagine how a kid would understand consumerism.
Right, but it's so like it's so in your face, but it's also so not in your face at the same time. Like you really have to pick it up a lot of the places. And so watching it as a 5-year-old, I was like, oh my God, this movie is freaking brilliant. I don't know. So yeah.
Well, yeah.
But yeah.
Especially if it's like a kid's film, I always find that the most interesting when people take the time in kids films to make it both for the kids and the adults, like what you're saying, like as a kid you watch it for the music, but as an adult you're like, ooh, oh man, that hits different.
I feel like that's such an issue with kids films today, is because like I feel like there's like it's missing that entire layer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, there's still it's there's kind of a resurgence from that. I mean, I've been watching kids movies because I have like 4 younger siblings, so I kind of have to keep up with them. But like, you know, the Lego movies are like, I think are fantastic, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is fantastic.
you're right.
So those are from Phil Lord and Chris Miller.
Those
so
are
like,
Yeah. Or Inside Out is a great example of a film made for like kids and adults. That's one we should definitely cover at some point. But like, you know, that film became a baseline for kids and adults to be able to talk about their feelings and to understand feelings. And it's something that like I've heard therapists use in different things, where it's like it becomes a point of connection for multiple different people for the subtext and for the stories that they're telling. It's not just for kids. It's a way to it created a language for people to be able to talk about feelings and emotions.
yeah, and kind of like,
really
you know,
neat.
have that bridge for between the generations, so that way they can understand each other. Because, you know, some adults forget what it's like to be kids, and then kids don't know what it's like to be adults and don't understand the world very much.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, as a kid, you know, watching a lot of movies as a kid, it's just kind of like, you know, you kind of, especially like the movies with like heavier topics or like kind of like incorporate real world emotional problems. It's just kind of like you grow up and then you think of like, you know, like you run into like a similar situation in real life. Like, oh, it's like this thing I watched when I was a kid. Like it's similar to that kind of deal. Like understanding the real world through pop culture. Maybe I just made it myself sound really lonely and boring. But I swear there are other people that have similar ideas.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
For a second there, I thought I cut out, or like you were just silent, like, oh man, this Kevin guy's weird now.
No, sorry.
No, just listening.
For sure. All right. So this is how you guys define subtext, and so now we're gonna dive into the film itself. So how would you describe the use of subtext in this film? For me, I see the best like example of subtext in the film is like the goal of the characters. Andrew, the main character, wants to be the best drummer, and Fletcher, the teacher, wants to be the creator of the next best musician. And these motivations, these goals motivate them to make decisions that they make, as well as the world hinting at the dark future in store for Andrew if he keeps going down this path. So there's always like mentions of like musicians just dying, like either committing suicide or dying in a car accident. They just have a tragic end to their story. And this is and it's not directly like you're going to end up like that guy. It's more like this is how other people have ended up doing what you're doing. And like, you know, and then like the audience is like, oh my God, is he going to end up like that? And then like with Fletcher, he has this huge ego that he's trying to stroke. It's like, yeah, I'm going to create the next best musician. I'm going to be the next Buddy Rich. Create the next Buddy Rich. Even so far as like the film's going so far as saying like when we introduced to Fletcher, he talks about Buddy Rich, and he's like, "Well, do you know how Buddy Rich became Buddy Rich? Because someone threw a symbol at his face." And then he throws a chair at Andrew shortly after that conversation to kind of like mirror that origin story for Buddy Rich. And then like it all culminates to the ending, where Andrew finally becomes the musician that Fletcher wants. And it's framed as a happy ending, but is it? That is a topic for a little bit later, but also use of subtext. But Tiffany, how would you describe the use of subtext in Whiplash as well?
I would describe it as a mind game. No, because this movie is really good, but it's really like a testament to like just dealing with somebody who is like so like you think that they want the best for you because you want the best for you, and they're being really hard on you, but they're being abusive. So like I feel like that's what I'm trying to say is like you go through the whole movie. I mean, at least for me, I went through the whole movie like interpreting it one way, and by the end I was like, really confused. And the first time I saw it, at least, and just kind of like, oh, like, no, it was in my face the whole time. Like, he didn't have his best interest in mind. He was trying to, like, Fletcher was trying to fulfill, like, a selfish sort of goal here and didn't care what happened to Andrew. And Andrew was the one who finally was like, no, I'm going to show you that I actually am worth it. And then, but, like, but it's still, like, at the end is, like, it's not really, like, happy ending, like, Disney movie happy ending. It's still like, ooh, like, still a little rocky ground there. So yeah.
Well, it comes down to like it comes down to, I mean, subtext. It's the question of, so at the end of the movie when Fletcher completely screws Andrew over by being like, all right, you're not going to know what this song is. We're going to play a song, even though I told you it was going to be all these other songs. We're going to play a song that you don't know. And I'm going to make you look terrible. And I had already just made this whole situation about, like, these are the people who could either make or break you. Like, you could either get a seat in Lincoln Hall, which is, you know, the big thing that he wanted, or... like, you could never pick up the drumsticks again. And obviously, Andrew gets so upset by this, you know, being shamed like that, or at least attempted to be shamed, that he, you know, pushes off stage and goes to his dad for this moment of, like, real connection. But then it's that turning moment of, is him turning around to go back to the drums for himself, to prove to himself that he can do that and that I will not be beaten? Or is it to prove to Fletcher, like, I'm going to show him that I am the next Buddy Rich because I deserve to go through this? Because Fletcher had made the whole point of, like, the real next best thing wouldn't be discouraged by, you know, adversity. If you fall flat on your face and you don't get back up, you weren't the real deal anyways. And so I think a huge part of it comes down to how do, at least when we're interpreting the ending, how do you interpret his feelings there and, like, the reason why he went back. But I think to Tiffany's point too, it almost reads like a sports film in some ways.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Like a sports, or even you could even do some comparisons to, like, a war film, really.
Yeah.
No,
of,
like, you literally can. Sorry, go ahead. You can go.
No, I mean, it was just to the point of, like, of him kind of pushing through that adversity and, like, the quite physical punishment that he gets put through, and the emotional punishment of, like, keep going, keep pushing, keep going, keep pushing. If you push through this, you'll get to the end. But in a more overt, is this the right thing to do kind of thing? But yeah, Tiffany, what were you going to say?
No, I was just talking about this movie with my boyfriend Ryan the other day, and he was like, yeah, it's kind of like that one more war movie. I think he's talking about Saving Private Ryan. I can't remember, but he was just like,
it's about the war movie.
Like, the feeling of, like, being so stressful and, like, going through this, and, like, everything kind of feels like a battle, and it's like you're watching a battle scene constantly. And then, you know, you get to the end and you're like, oh my God, like, I can't believe I just sat through that whole thing.
Yeah. And, like, the was it worth it kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Like,
was it worth it? Yeah. Was that worth all the blood, sweat, and, like, literal tears splayed out over this drum set just for this guy to just screw him over again and again and again? Like, and then it's like, what is he? Then at one point it's like, it doesn't really ever seem that Andrew ever really asks himself, like, what am I doing this for? He just keeps doing it. And we don't really ever, I guess it's like, that's not really the point of it, but it's just, like, interesting that you can literally look at it like, oh, he's doing this for himself. Because a lot of people will say, oh, he went back and he did it for himself. But a lot of people will tell you he went back and tried to get Fletcher's approval.
Exactly.
And that, I think, that is what's so stressful, is because we're not totally sure. But that's what makes the film so rewatchable, I guess, because you pick up on stuff more and more the more you watch it, at least for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, there's a shot at the end where we only see Fletcher's eyes. And it's the moment of Andrew's already come back and has been doing a great job, and he's pushing through and he's telling Fletcher what to do and all this stuff. And it's like this moment of like, is that pride in his eyes, or is it, I've got you again, you are mine? And it's just like, the first time around, it felt like pride. The second time around, it felt much more ominous.
Yeah, like he's trapped. Now he's just trapped.
Right.
Yeah, I got you. You're in my claws.
Yeah, no, I mean, I saw it as like a mix of both when I watched it recently, where it's pride is like, you know, because he's stroking his own ego, is like, yes, I've created the next big musician, and then it's like, yes, you are mine now. So like, you know, it's like, you know, they are now two peas in a pod, unfortunately. But then like my interpretation of Andrew going back on stage is that he did it. And Andrew's mentality is that he's doing it for himself. He's proving to himself that he can take on whatever Fletcher dishes out. You know, which is that it's continuing the cycle of abuse from as a victim, where he is mentally not connecting that Fletcher is the problem. He thinks that he himself is the problem, and that if only he could win Fletcher's approval, that, you know, the abuse will be over.
Totally.
And then he'll gain respect, and then it won't be this like game of like, not cat and mouse, but like this like literal horrible cycle of pain that he's gonna have to he may keep going through. We don't really have an example of like another student that succeeded, except that student, we find out, tragically like committed suicide. And you kind of have to think about that too. It's like, okay, well, did Fletcher do the same thing to him? Is that what they're implying? Or is this just like, is that just like a tragic thing that's like not even connected to it? But, you know, the way it's set up, I think in the movie, is around the time that the school officials ask Andrew if Fletcher was too hard on him. Am I correct about that?
No, you're correct.
Yeah, I don't know. That always messes me up. I'm always like, oh wait, like I still like, for some reason I still don't understand what they're trying to tell us there,
right?
Or if it's just, you know,
it's
just a sad thing.
Yeah, so my interpretation of that was, so I think there was a scene where Fletcher talks about how Buddy Rich was created and why he wants to make next Buddy Rich, and like his teaching method. He's like, yeah, you have like, you know, some students is like, you know, can't do it. I'm looking for the student that can do it. So, and then we see how he interacts with the rest of the musicians. So he kind of treats them all the same, but it's like the more potential he sees in someone, the harder he is on them, to the point of breaking them. So I believe that the other previous student who took their life went through the same thing Andrew went through, but like wasn't, for lack of a better words, wasn't quote unquote strong enough to handle Fletcher, or at least from Fletcher's perspective, just wasn't strong enough to make the cut.
Yeah. Or like maybe he did, because I think he said that like isn't part of that character's arc, like, because we never see them or anything, but isn't part of it that they went on to like be in a band or something?
Yeah, he got into the Lincoln Center band and was like third chair. Within a year, he was the first chair, and then soon after, he passes away. And so it's definitely, but like when they're talking about it, it's interesting because you can see two different reactions to this news, because you have what you were talking about, Tiffany, with them later in the film, like getting the news of like how he passed away. But we also see Fletcher's reaction of like absolute pain and anguish. And it's interesting because I think he genuinely feels that pain, but it's also a realization that you get when you get to that second scene of he didn't think any of that was in relation to him. And you see that throughout kind of Fletcher's character arc, if you can call that. It's
more like a plateau.
But it's never Fletcher's fault. It's never a cause. It's you weren't good enough. It's a constant blame of the person who couldn't handle the pressure even though it was Fletcher creating that pressure that, you know, forced so many people to feel like anxious and depressed and to go through these like really like serious internal turmoil that we see with Andrew as he's like, you know, pushing himself and like feeling terrible about himself, and he lashes out at other people for making, you know, for not realizing what he can be. And but he's striving so much for connection, which is, you know, one of the things, one of the really heavy pieces of subtext in this film is like Andrew's attempt for connection, and even Fletcher's attempt for connection. Because like in the beginning of the film, we see there's these really interesting moments of Andrew looking at a boy and a girl, like having this kind of romantic moment before the band practice starts, right? And you can tell that he's like kind of watching this in a little bit of like somewhere between like jealousy and sadness. And then you see another example of him seeing two friends have this connection and like, you know, doing the bro thing of like, you know, fist bumping and being like, hey, and talking beforehand. And again, it's that little bit of like, I want that connection. And you see a couple different things of that. And then throughout the film, you see him try and get those connections and that affirmation from those people. Like he tries to have the relationship with the girl, which is a bit awkward. Like unintentionally so. Like it was intentionally meant to feel like a little bit of, you know, it's a difficult thing to have a connection with a significant other. And you see him try for that, and then he loses it. And then at the dinner table, he tries to have this connection with his family and for them to feel proud of him and to like really feed into him. And like, but he feels second fiddle to the other people. And so he does a little bit of tearing down of the people at the table because he doesn't feel good about himself and like doesn't feel like he's getting the, you know, connection and stuff that
approval.
He needs. Yeah, approval. Thank you.
I found it very funny for the dinner scene that the parents were like praising the athlete for having a real job, and they're like, "Oh, music's not a real job." It's kind of it's like, oh, it's like usually parents don't think sports is a real job either.
I mean, none of us as filmmakers can relate to the struggle of being told to get a real job.
The big struggle right there.
I had an uncle like the year after I graduated, and I was like working in film, and he was like, so you're out of school, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, you're gonna sign up for the fire academy, go be a fireman? And I'm like, what? He's like because that's what like everyone does. That's what I guess people in my family do. They go to school and they don't. I don't know what he was implying, but that's what other people do, I guess.
That's a left turn.
Because it just is like, because in my family, it just seems that like no one actually thinks that I was gonna do it at the time, which I don't know why, because I was doing it. So it was just like, they were like, oh, just no one took it seriously. So I know exactly how that feels, just to be like, looked like your whole family's like on the same wavelength, and then they look at you and like kind of like in the dinner scene, and you just feel like, oh, like, okay, like I feel like on top of my game when I'm like in that environment, and then when you're out of that environment, it's like people see it completely differently.
Yeah,
I think that's really interesting too,
which is a really great example of like how personal experience can affect subtext in the film, not like from the film itself, but how the viewer perceives the subtext, adding another layer of emotional complexity to each moment.
Yeah, what Cassie was just talking about, like when you watch the date scene, it comes before like the family dinner scene, and you're kind of like, why is he acting so weird? Like, I know it's not as extreme as this, but it reminds me of the first scene in The Social Network when he's like grilling the girl about like what, I don't know, they're just not clicking, and they're just like on different pages, and it's really awkward and it's like uncomfy, and it's this in Whiplash, it's kind of like a scaled down version of that,
right?
Where he's like making her feel like crap because she's just like doing her thing in college. She doesn't really know what she wants to do yet. And he's very like, well, I know I want to do, and like, you should know what you want to do too. And he's very passionate about that.
Right.
And he can have that like sort of superior, like not superiority, but he feels like he's like on a high horse.
He's one of
and
those guys.
And then when he's with his family, they completely knock him off of that high horse. And so it's also just, it's interesting to watch him be a product of his environment, like at school where everything is super competitive and gritty and like nerve wracking. And then also like at home where like no one takes anything he does seriously. So it's, you kind of feel bad for him.
For sure. And like, especially, you know, cause it's kind of that struggle for approval. Like in every single aspect of his life, he's just like, I just want somebody to tell me that I'm doing good. Like, I just want someone to be proud of me. Cause like, he doesn't get, cause I feel like that's where some of that, like, well, I know what I want to do. And like, I want to do the drumming, and I'm really struggling and fighting towards this. He's just like wants her to be proud of him. It comes off as a little like frustrating and egotistical, but like he just wants somebody to be proud of him. And the same thing at the dinner table. Like, he just wants his family to be like, I'm so proud that you did this. Like, you got into this top tier school. Like, you can stand on your own merits and not compare yourself to everybody else, because he's constantly being compared to other people when he's at school. And he just needs to like, he just wants and desires that, like, I am good enough for being me. And he just never gets that. And he tries to get that from Fletcher too. And like, that's a huge part of that. Like, Fletcher is seen as this idol and like this person who runs studio band. And like, he just wants and is constantly struggling for that approval. And like, because of the abuse that he's going through, and because of the way that Fletcher grooms him to like be like, I'm doing this because I love you. I'm doing this because you deserve to be the best, and you deserve this like abuse that I'm giving you. Like, so in my attempt to make you better, I am trying to make you better by putting you through all of these obstacles. And so it gives Andrew this interpretation and this ability to like, he justifies Fletcher's actions because of the way that Fletcher is framing him and framing them and grooming him to accept that, you know, which is, it's tough to watch. It's hard because you're like, oh no. But like, that's how that is. Like, when you're inside of a situation, it's hard to see, you know, the outward view of the situation. You're like, no, I can make justifications for this. No, he's not actually a bad guy. He's just trying to make me better. When in fact, it is not. It is not.
It is not the case.
Period.
Nope. He's stuck in his mind warp of
very much so. Like, everything that Fletcher does, like, he like uses homophobic slurs, and he uses fatphobic language, and he uses sexist language, and he uses racist language. He physically hits Andrew when he's like, oh my gosh, that might be the most stressful scene for me. Of like, he's like, are you rushing? Slap. Are you rushing? Slap. Like, are you rushing or dragging? Slap.
Yeah.
And like, the fact that those are like real slaps too, and I think it took them like a lot of takes to get that, and that's just like even sadder. I'm like, man.
And then like the explosion at the end, it's like, so you do know the difference. Like, yikes.
Yes. Oh God, that is like,
and it's like this weird thing of like, it's like a congratulatory, you do know the difference, because he had just been set up with the person not knowing if they were out of tune or not. And he said that the not knowing was worse than being out of tune. And so like, for Fletcher, it was a point of, this kid at least knows something. You do know the difference. And being, you know, hit was better than like not knowing the difference and then just kicking him out and not coming back, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see. There's a lot of like setup and release or execution throughout the whole film. Like they set you up with, you know, him doing it to somebody else and then him doing it to Andrew and seeing the different ways of interpreting that and the different reactions that Andrew even has of when it happens to somebody else versus when it happens to him.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of subtext in this movie to talk about, and what's great about this movie too is that the subtext is very clear and cohesive. So even if you listen to us talk about it and then you watch the movie, you're gonna be able to see what we're talking about. Pretty much like now that your eyes have been open to it, it's gonna be right there. It's gonna be not that we ruined the movie. Hopefully, we didn't ruin the movie for you. I feel very sorry if we ruined the movie for you, but it's just kind of like showing you guys a new way of watching films and how apparent subtext is once you like pull back the curtain just a little bit. But on that note, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about our next film and a little bit fun facts about this film in general. Starting a podcast? Try a Podbean Unlimited hosting plan. It's what we use here at Committed Critics, giving us the opportunity to have our show on Pandora, iHeartRadio, and even Spotify. You can get your first month of unlimited hosting for free on us by going to podbean.com/committedcrits, just like our Twitter, or by clicking the link in the description. Podbean, the easiest, most affordable option to get started in podcasting. Hey, welcome back to Breaking Into Cinema. Hopefully our discussion of subtext and film theory helps provide a foundation for what it's really like diving into film theory as a whole. We wanted to start with subtext because it was kind of like the most entry-level aspect of film theory that we can out there. So because once you start seeing subtext, you kind of start seeing other things as well. And hopefully once you recognize subtext, you have a great starting point to start interpreting what you're experiencing when you watch a movie. It's, you know, it's definitely like the start of going down the rabbit hole, as you will see as this podcast goes on. But
welcome to Wonderland.
Right. There's an invisible cat, I think. I don't know. I haven't seen Alice in Wonderland. So now we're going to talk about some fun facts about Whiplash. In case you didn't know, this is an independent film. Independent films are produced outside the standard studio system. So it's not like a Disney production with billions and billions of dollars. Although independent films could have millions and billions of dollars, depending how much money the producers want to put into it, and if they're rich enough for that. We Committed Critics, our main show, has an episode dedicated to explaining independent films. It's episode 17, where we talk about the Spirit Awards. So yeah, independent films are kind of just self-produced movies, more or less, or like have like a small amount of investors. But it's usually one person or a group of people have like a vision for a film that are not part of the studio system, and they try to make that film a reality. Cassie, Tiffany, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think you got it.
Yeah, you really covered it. Yeah, there's a wide range of what people kind of consider an indie movie, but it's usually pretty much exactly what you said, outside the studio system, and usually with a smaller budget. Though there are also large budget quote indie films, like for example Cloud Atlas, which is like technically an indie film because it's not shot inside the studio system, but it also had a budget of like, it was like $130 million because it was by the Wachowski siblings.
I know. After you make, The Matrix and Beowulf, and you kind of just have money.
It's a lot easier to acquire money and make the thing that you wanna make.
For sure.
Yeah.
So now we're going to dedicate this portion of the show to talk about fun facts about the movie. Just some little trivia here and there. If you're interested in how movies were made, or if you're interested in making movies in general, maybe these fun facts will be interesting to you. Cassie, let's start with you. What fun facts did you bring for us today?
So this film is really interesting because it's, as we said, it's an indie, but it's done in a very interesting way. So it's something that you actually see people try and replicate now because of how, part of how successful Whiplash was. Because he shot it as a short film first and submitted it to Sundance in 2013 because he couldn't find funding. So he's like, well, I'll make the mini version. And ended up winning the short film jury award, and then congrats, he had money to make the big version.
And you can actually watch the short film on Vimeo. We'll link that in the description.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Yeah, I'll have to go back and watch the pitch version. But yeah, it's also an indie in the fact that it was shot so quickly. Because the actual film was shot in 19 days, which for a feature is quite quick.
I mean, you have to think about it though. There's like not many locations in this film.
Oh, for sure, totally doable. We had they kind of get like one setup and kind of like run through everything they need to do for that setup. So it's not like 19 days is still really fast for a feature film. But it's like seeing the scale of this, it's like I can believe it. Yeah, well, it makes it a great example of like how to utilize what you have to create something with like the small budget that he has. It's like, all right, you do things like minimize your locations and minimize how many casts you need, kind of throughout the film, because it's a fairly small cast. It's really mostly Andrew and Fletcher, and there's definitely great examples of how to minimize cost in this project.
And I just going off of that, when I watched the audio commentary, Damien Chazelle and J.K. Simmons, every time I think most of the film was shot in LA, and so they were like, oh yeah, this is LA, and I'm like, oh my god, it looks like New York. So like it's just amazing like what you can do. And like the band room is like on a sound stage, and they were like talking about that, and I was like, I swear they shot this in like a school. Like I swear, like I don't know, it's so interesting how you can manipulate your surroundings to be so efficient in your schedule and make people believe that you're in a completely different place than you are. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Magic.
Apparently, for the short film, the cast and crew worked for 18-hour days, rushing to finish it on time. And as someone who has worked 18-hour days, oof. But apparently, like the regular for the feature was regularly 14-hour days, which is also kind of oof. Usually for a film crew, you're working 12 hours a day, usually at max.
Usually,
and indie films are a little interesting when it comes to labor.
Yeah, there's a reasons why we have unions now, and why there are like. There's lots of pros and cons that I hear for different industries with different unions, but woof, man, the industry was bad before the union.
Oh yeah. If you're like, interested in if you're wanting to work on a movie and like your director / producer is an egomaniac and delusional, maybe you might want to skip that one.
Yeah,
speaking from experience.
Yeah, just be prepared for some long, hard days. I always tell people are like, oh my gosh, that's so fun. You're making movies. And I'm like, if you don't love what you are doing, it is absolutely the hardest and worst job in the world. It is really, truly like a labor of love. And you see it by like the throughput of people. Like so many people join the film industry and become jaded quite quick on
that's
what it actually is. It's it's hard.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I don't like everyone's always like, oh my god, I can't believe you do like 12 to 15 hours a day. And I'm like, literally it goes by so quickly when you like have it in your mindset that you're doing something that like you want to be there and like you want to be a part of something and like or you really like the crew and like it doesn't feel like 12. I mean, sometimes it hits you. Sometimes it really like feel it after
the first night shoot on the schedule.
Yeah, that really. But yeah, no, I think, it takes a lot of people by surprise, but it also, like, if you really want to be there, it really doesn't. It's not that gruesome as some people make it out to be.
But I also want to point out to all the people who are like, if we want you to do it for credit and food, and you should be doing this because you love movie making. No. Pay your crew and pay them appropriately and pay them OT.
Please.
Because doing it for the love of the game does not pay the bills and is not fair to the people who are artists.
I mean,
you
even
don't
though
tell the tax person, you love taxes, you should do my taxes for free.
Ew.
That's not how this works.
Yeah. I mean, even though I did say that's like, oh, if your first film is that offer that you get is that you have to work for free and you have a very delusional director / producer who just doesn't know what he's doing. I said don't do it, but that was my first film, and I made connections through that to work on better movies where I actually got paid. Yeah, and it kind of snowballed. So it's just like it's a field of business that doesn't recognize that not everyone in the business recognize it as a business. Like, so you have to make sure you navigate, know your way around the place, and like know how to recognize people who want to take advantage of other people, compared to those who actually want to make movies and like create careers for people.
Well, and there's a huge difference between like paying your dues a little bit is what we often call it, of like, you have to go in and you're going to have to start at the bottom. You're not, anybody who goes to film school and thinks that they're going to be a director right out of the gate, I'm sorry. That's not how it works.
80% of film students are just shattered.
Wait, if you're going to come out, right?
What?
You think you're going to come out and be
this
a DP?
This is news to me.
Yeah. You think you're going to be a DP right out of the gate? That's just not how it works, my friends. No. You gotta work your way up. There's definitely a balance there, but it's also like choosing to work with people that are kind and thoughtful of your time and considerate of, if you are doing it for like the experience and the credit to learn things, that like you are treating them with respect and like not, you're treating them and their time kindly. Like, for example, I worked on a short film recently where the pay was not good, but it was a 1-day shoot that we intentionally did as a 1-day shoot, and we kept it to 12 hours. Like, we shot what we needed to shoot, and we did it. And like, our biggest thing was like, we want to be respectful of people's times, and even the little bit that they're able to like get you, like, that is a huge deal. Because it shows that like, I respect you and I respect your time and your effort and for being here, because it's hard.
Oh, definitely.
It's hard.
So we got off track a little bit, but Tiffany, what's your fun fact about Whiplash?
My fun fact is that Miles Teller, who plays Andrew, he actually played the drums. Like, I think there was a double, like, in some close-up shots, I think, but for the most part, he played their drums to, like, a pre-recorded track, like, on camera. And I guess Damien Chazelle didn't know this, but, like, he had been playing drums since he was 15. I think more so, like, in, like a rock band sort of way. But he didn't really, like, I don't think he knew, like, jazz drumming, like, classical drumming. So they had to, like, just in like a mere amount of like short weeks, they had to like get him used to playing like a certain way. But I just thought that was really cool. Like, I didn't know that he was actually playing. When I was watching the movie with my boyfriend, who is a drummer, not like in a classical way, but he could tell like that he was actually playing. He always points that out in movies. We're like, oh, they're not actually playing guitar. They're not actually drumming. But he was like, oh no, he's like actually playing. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, no, that is really interesting. Also, I'm just like looking through like this Hollywood Reporter article, is just kind of like see if I can find any other bonus fun facts. But like apparently, what's his face? I'm totally blanking on his name. The main guy.
J.K. Simmons?
No, Miles Teller.
Miles Teller.
We were just talking about it. I don't know why I was blinking. Apparently, he was 27 years old during the filming of this. And I don't know, when I was watching it, I was like, oh, he looks like a 19-year-old in this movie.
He does. He's very young looking.
Yeah. Definitely
amazing.
works to his advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could tell, man, this is not like a diss on Miles Teller, but just you can tell like when he's in other movies like Divergent or something like that, he doesn't have the same level of investment as he does in Whiplash. Whiplash is like the most invested I've seen him in the movie, but I also haven't seen his other movies like War Dogs or anything like that.
It's strange. Like in his other movies, he does look like an adult, but like in this movie, he's really good at like acting with his eyes. So he's got that like puppy dog look on his face all the time that makes him look younger. So I think that's interesting.
What a guy, Miles Teller. And J.K. Simmons, which like apparently he was just the nicest person ever. Like when they weren't recording, compare like a complete contrast to what he was on camera. But yeah, I mean, J.K. Simmons just has a prolific career. We all know him from Spider-Man, but he's like, before that he was prolific, and he's been prolific since then.
Yeah, but Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. Back to it all comes full circle.
Oh my God.
Well, always the best J. Jonah Jameson. No one will ever be better than J.K. Simmons. That's my take on it. I'm fine if it comes full circle.
J. Jonah Jameson is quoted a lot in my apartment.
I need pictures of Spider-Man. Hand in the cookie jar.
Yeah.
But
Such
yeah,
a good movie.
that's Whiplash. It's an amazing movie. It's kind of the big breakthrough of indie cinema in the 2010s, and kind of like paved the way for a lot of more independent movies that came down the road. Like I want to say like I don't know if there's any correlation to this, but I from my perspective, I think Whiplash kind of opened the doors with letting A24 have a bigger name for itself, to give A24 a chance when it comes to distributing indie films. And just kind of like the indie films we see today, just kind of like there are some references to Whiplash in like the cinematography and the editing, where it's like, Whiplash is like a good foundation for indie narrative. From what I've seen in some movies, I'm blanking on specific examples, but they're there if you watch post 2014 indie movies. I want to say Sound of Metal even pulls some inspiration from Whiplash, but obviously it's a completely different story. Still fantastic drum movie, great drum movie.
Yeah.
So now with our discussion on Whiplash coming to a close, we want to introduce our next film that we will be discussing. You will have 4 weeks to watch this movie. And Tiffany, you chose this movie. Do you want to tell us what it is?
Brick is a 2005 mystery noir film directed by Rian Johnson. And the synopsis reads, after receiving a frantic phone call from his ex-girlfriend, teenager loner Brendan Fry, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, learns that her dead body has been found. Vowing to solve her murder himself, he must infiltrate high school cliques that he previously avoided. His search for the truth places him before some of the school's roughest characters, leading to a confrontation with a drug dealer known as the Pin. But yeah, it was. I think it was one of like Rian Johnson's like first films.
And we love a good JGL, cameo. We love him showing up and playing around.
Absolutely.
I want to call it a cameo. He's the lead role.
That's true. You're right.
Like,
I chose a bad word. I tried to sound smart, and it turned out very bad.
No. Well, have you guys seen Brick before?
I have not.
Okay.
No, I've never seen it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I absolutely love Brick. Like you said, it's a mystery noir, but it's like it's a high school setting. So it's kind of like a genre mash where you have this high school setting, but it's the story and the writing and direction is all like a noir film. So like the way the dialogue flows, it's like really fast and rapid and like a noir film. So it's kind of like, it's really interesting to see the two genres blend together. And the performances are really great. Like Joseph Gordon-Levitt's fantastic in it. The direction is amazing. Fun fact, Rian Johnson uses the same cinematographer for all of his movies, Steven Yedlin. So you kind of see like the origins of their style. But it's also like, it's very, like, even though the cinematography may not be like worthy of a wallpaper, it still makes you feel the emotions of the scene, and it does that extremely well. And it's along with the editing too. It is available to rent digitally for $3.99 on other platforms. You can also find a DVD or Blu-ray as well. You can, if you go to like a used DVD store, like you probably find it for like $2 or $3. I'm sure it was. Apparently, it was more popular than I thought it was, because when I didn't know about it when it came out in 2005, because I was like 9 years old and it's an R-rated movie. But then like later on in life, I was like, a friend was talking to me about like, oh man, have you seen Brick? Brick's amazing. And like, oh, okay. I checked it out. I was like, oh, this is great. And then only to find out like everyone my age was talking about Brick. Like, how did you guys know about this movie?
I've never heard of it. I never heard of it until you like put it on our list, and I was like, wait a second, what is that? And I was just curious, and I'm like, oh my god, it's Ryan Johnson. I have to see this.
It's about a guy who throws a brick at a window. It's great. Brick.
Sounds like we all have a exciting time ahead of us to go watch this movie and to discuss it in a couple weeks.
Yeah. So you have 4 weeks to watch it. But we will be back in 2 weeks to discuss a film topic. Just a nice little discussion topic chat between the three of us. And then 2 weeks after that is our discussion of Brick. So 4 weeks to watch it. Highly recommend. It's only 90 minutes, I believe, too, if I remember correctly.
Ooh,
it's very short movie, yeah.
We've all been spoiled with like Lord of the Rings and like 4-hour extended cuts.
Oh, hey man, I love that 4-hour Justice League. All thoughts and all. Any closing thoughts before we end the episode?
No. I'm really excited to watch Brick, and I hope you are too.
Sweet.
Yeah, I'm stoked. It's gonna be fun.
Awesome. Well, this has been Breaking Into Cinema. Thank you for joining us for another episode. You can follow our production Committed Critics on Twitter at Committed Crits. That's COMMITTED CRITS. I'm Kevin Lau. You can follow me on Twitter at Author Klau. That's AUTHORKLAU.
And I'm Tiffany, and you can read my film reviews at crprights.com.
And you can follow me at Cassie Story, CASSIESSTORY on Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah, and you can support us on Patreon, link below. Just $1 or $2 a month could really support the show, and we appreciate it very much. And then special thanks to Zach, who loves the editing of the episode, even though he hasn't heard it yet, and Jordan for being our sound engineer. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.